thought it would have been a good opportunity at FTF to bring together some experts in that industry, and we have some very distinguished speakers that we'll introduce a little later, to talk about the status of this market, where we're seeing this market going, and why we are excited about it. So my job here is just to kind of set the stage. Is what I'm going to try to do and share a little bit of my personal view about this marketplace and why I think it's a great opportunity not only for Freescale but for the industry. So first, a little reminder. It was about just around the year 2000 that globally consumer electronics spend became a larger portion of the total spend in electronics in our world. I think it was in 2001. It used to be, we came from a marketplace where most of the innovation and the spending was done by corporations, and slowly but surely over the years, the consumers and consumer electronics took over as a dominant aspect of the spending. And this is going to be a continuous, probably double-digit growth. Obviously, we had a pause in 2009 because of the economic crisis, but when it's all said and done, and of course the year is not over, if consumer electronic spend did grow by 2.5% in 2009, that would probably be one of the only segments that will have grown from 2008. So it's just to show you that the resilience and the importance of consumer electronics in everyday's life. I actually believe that there's a lot of unfulfilled opportunities for growth because a lot of devices that we put in the hands of consumers are not properly designed. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I don't know if any of you have bought recently a Blu-ray disc player, but the engineers that designed a Blu-ray disc player that thought that when you put the disc in, you close the door and it takes 45 seconds before anything happens on your screen, were not very customer-centric. That's a typical example of, yes, from an engineering standpoint, it probably takes a long time to load all the software stack and read the disk, etc. But you have to find a way to make sure that the user doesn't see this, because that's not the experience that the user wants to have. Likewise, in the PC space, for many years, we've all been suffering with the fact that when you start your PC, it takes between 45 seconds and a minute and a half to finally be able to work. That is not what people want. If you had a choice, you want obviously to have an instant on experience. I always took the parallel of saying it's almost like if we were all together designing a fridge, and we put a fridge in the market, when you pull the handle, it takes 45 seconds before you can get to your beer or your orange juice. You wouldn't sell a lot of those fridges. So there's a lot of potential in that marketplace, infinite potential, as long as you design products that are relevant and that are matching the use case that the users are looking for. And a lot about what we're going to discuss today on Smartbooks is about this use case and how it differs from the PC, and why we believe there's a huge market opportunity, because it's going to answer a different need from the user. So clearly, electronics are part of our lives increasingly. The younger the generation, the more electronics are an integral part of the life. And also what we've seen is that the speed at which new technologies are being adopted is increasing. I don't have all the statistics in my mind, but we know how long it took for cell phones to become basically something that everyone owned. It went a lot faster for the subsequent generation of devices, and I think this trend will continue to accelerate itself. The young generation is spending a greater amount of their discretionary income on consumer electronic devices than the previous generations, and so forth. So that's another key driver of growth, is the fact that there is really no limit to the amount of discretionary spend that tech-savvy Generation X are willing to put into these devices. This is a U.S. statistics. I think that we have a tendency, we being U.S. companies, to be a little too centered around what I would call the old world markets. They're important in volume and ability to set trends, But obviously a lot of the growth and a lot of the definition of what type of products are going to be needed to be successful are increasingly driven by what somebody, a young person in India or in China or in Asia Pacific in general is looking for. And in that respect, the partnership that we have in China with our Smartbook initiative is very important. We want to make sure that we don't miss the mark and that we don't design a product only for what I would call mature or older markets. So the other thing that characterizes the opportunity for Smartbooks is that if you really think about it, when the PC was created, the internet didn't exist in the way it exists today. First, user-generated content was a dream at that point, and the pervasive connectivity and the amount of information that was available on the internet was really basically reserved to either military or government-driven associations and a little bit of commercial data. But today, the internet is a very different animal. It's a means of communication and information for billions of people around the world. And if you just imagine your life without internet connectivity, and it's pretty easy, just go home and turn off your cable modem or your DSL connection and try to stay a week without connecting to the net, and you'll realize how painful it is. But yet, most of the devices that we're using have been defined prior to the internet being so essential to our lives. And you can see that in the sense that they're not always on. Connectivity is not as simple as it should be. And really, connectivity should be a little bit like radio. If you want to listen to the radio, you flip a switch and you get radio. And connectivity to the internet should be as simple, as easy, and as rapid to obtain. We're not quite there yet, and of course there's some business model issues to that, but I think we'll eventually get there. Everyone will have an IP address, and that should allow them to be connected because that's the way to live. Statistics on penetration, obviously, there's a lot of challenges in increasing connectivity in many countries. In a previous life, when I was at AMD, we were working with an association, one laptop per child, to try to bring computing and connectivity to a lot of the emerging markets. I think we'll continue to see a lot of initiatives around that because obviously the more people connected, the more value there is in the whole network. But there's a lot of progress being made. And I don't know when we're going to bridge the 50% of the population connected, but I think it'll be probably before 2020. And perhaps Smartbooks and all of the family of products that are associated with that category will actually help accelerate this phenomenon. Cost is, of course, a big issue. And that's one of the reasons why, even though we do believe in 3G and LTE connectivity, we think that still today, the association of a Smartbook with a 3G connectivity is not a must because of the cost implications to it. So, yes, there will be a significant amount of Smartbooks that will be 3G enabled, but we also think that many of them can be just good enough with Wi-Fi. So, if you look at where are the future consumers that are going to buy all these electronics, well, it's pretty simple to see. The numbers speak for themselves. There's interesting markets like Turkey, for example. Turkey is soon to be the largest country in Europe in terms of potential. Very interesting country, right at the intersection between East and West. Fairly highly educated, big capacity in terms of production and manufacturing. Of course, China is number one. I'll give you a little story. Recently, I was in a meeting with a partner of ours in Canada, and they were talking to me about their website and how proud they were about the amount of content on their website that was translated to Mandarin. And I said, what you really should think about is how much of the content do you need to translate in English? Because it's more important these days to have the entire content in Mandarin than it is to have it entirely in English. There are more people connected to the internet that speak Mandarin than there are people speaking English. That's the reality. So we certainly believe that it's very important to have understanding of the needs of these young generation in the BRIC countries, and we also believe that the type of content and the type of business model and usage models that are going to be created in those countries are going to drive fundamentally the innovation for those type of devices. All right, all of this is driven, of course, by the web and the content. Clearly, there's been a very, very fast and amazing transformation over the last few years where the internet moved from essentially a static source of content and information to the social networking phenomenon. And the fact that today, the younger generation uses that tool in a very different way than I certainly ever used it and probably ever will. As a result of that, the key sites have changed very quickly, and the emergence of both from a global standpoint, but also if you look, for example, at China, the emergence of those rich media content, social networking websites as the main destination is quite amazing. That also has probably some important implications in terms of partnerships and how smart books may become not specialized devices, but certainly devices that need to be completely tied into the innovation and the use cases that those sites are going to bring to the marketplace. And we have some experts in the room that will talk to you a lot about what the implications are of that. So, what is the smart book? First, the smart book is not a netbook in the sense that it works. No, that's probably a cheap shot, but it's an all-day, instant-on device that's probably closer to a smartphone than it is to a notebook. It's a device that was conceived from the beginning to give a great user experience to a person that is probably more tech-savvy than the first generation of users were when they bought notebooks, but that doesn't want to be bothered by technology. There's a difference between knowing what to do if things go wrong and wanting to be bothered with it. And I'm sure there'll be some discussions around that aspect of things. So we see it more as the intersection or the missing link between the traditional world of PCs and the world of phones. I'm a passionate user of this device. I'm sure a few of you have something like this in the room. But the reality of browsing the web on this is an utopia. If I need one quick information, I'm going to use this to go find it, but I'm not going to browse the web on this. The screen's too small, the data transmission is too slow, the keyboard is not comfortable enough. So, on the other hand, a lot of people in the world are not what I like to call Microsoft Office hostages. I'll give you an example. My wife doesn't need to use Microsoft Office ever in her life. She might need to display a PowerPoint slide that a friend sends her, or read an Adobe document, perhaps look at an Excel spreadsheet, perhaps. But she will never create a document in those formats. At best, she's going to want to read and receive those documents. So for her, a PC is not the right device. She doesn't need computing power, but she needs rendering, she needs sound, she needs connectivity, and she needs simplicity. So I really believe that the smart book category is incremental. Yes, there will be some fights at the borders. It will be fighting with the high end of smartphones, and it will be fighting with the Intel x86 camp. There's no debate about that. But fundamentally, if we do our job right, the smart book will create more new opportunities than it will cannibalize. And it will be sufficiently differentiated that it will be bought by people that may already have a smartphone and will continue to use one. And will probably have a PC, an x86 PC somewhere in their home, because they need to use the functionalities that come with being the hostage of Microsoft Office. So there's been a lot of research done to date, but a lot more needed to be done on what we believe end users are looking for in terms of those devices. We've talked about portability, of course. Ideally, I always laugh at notebooks that tell you that they're less than 4 pounds, but then you have a 1.5 pound power supply to carry along. So you need real portability, which implies, of course, battery life, but also just thickness and ruggedized environments and so forth. It needs to be easy to use. If you need to be the tech support engineer for half of your family, that's probably not a good product. And it needs to be connected, whichever way is available: wired, wireless, seamless. What people want more of is, of course, insatiable appetite for browsing, a lot more usage of those devices for entertainment. I mean, look at the amount. I don't know if it's as much the case in China as it is in the US, but I'm amazed by the number of people who watch movies on their iPod. That's a very small screen. So I think that they will watch movies on those Smartbooks, because it's just about the right screen when you're flying. There's, of course, this incredible success of the App Store and the ability for anyone to, on a basic framework, and just add very quickly the applets that are important to your usage. It's kind of desktop on demand. And I've talked about the necessity for affordable and really ubiquitous connectivity. What they want less of is complexity and maintenance, service packs. What they want a lot less of is BSOD. Does everybody know what BSOD is? Okay, it's a very famous Microsoft word. It's called blue screen of death. What they don't want is unnecessary features. For all of you that use applications, how many times when you go down the pull-down menus, you see 90% of the features that are not needed for you? It's good to know that they're there, and you certainly, if ever one day you need it, you should be able to access them. But I've always been amazed that something as simple as being able to go into an application and select whether you're a novice, intermediate, expert, or genius, and have the application kind of adapt itself in terms of how much it exposes of its capability to you. That's pretty simple, and it's not done. And they don't want to be waiting. I mean, nobody, as I said at the beginning, nobody wants to wait for a system to boot, for a system to reboot, for an application to load, for a connection to establish itself. All of this needs to be quick. Because we are, not only in America, but around the world, more and more a culture of instant gratification and of impatience. That's just the reality. So, one of the things that I believe also is going to be different and an opportunity for differentiation in the Smartbook place is the ecosystem that we're creating. I mean, essentially today what you have in the notebook space and netbook space, x86 world, is an ecosystem where you have two super dominant players imposing their rules to the rest of the world. And I think personally that a lot of the excitement around the Smartbook category has to do with the fact that every one of the ecosystem partners, software developers, retailers, operators, ODMs, OEMs, content providers, and of course semiconductor manufacturers are seeing an opportunity to redefine the rules and create an environment that's much more normal, so to speak, where innovation is enabled, profits are shared, and the pace of innovation is really a function of how smart the players are, rather than some super dominant players dictating the pace at which things happen. I certainly think that in itself is a differentiator, besides the fact that we have an opportunity to make better products that will in some way ensure the success of this category. The market is ready for a very different business model around this type of computing device than the one that's been in power for so many years in the x86 space. So we're, Freescale is very lucky. We've been in business for many, many years. We've had plenty of opportunity to demonstrate that we're a company that's easy to do business with, that is willing to share, that's very focused on serving the needs of its customers and supporting those. We have no intention to go and build a very prominent end-user brand. So, we're not going to brand ourselves inside or outside. And we're really there to just innovate and provide a new level of functionality in those devices by supporting the creative ideas of our ODMs and OEMs. This slide basically says, the Smartbook will be a success in my mind if it's not a PC. I'm sure you'll hear from other speakers today and they'll express their opinion on this, but I think that it would be a tremendous mistake and a tragedy if we're trying to put this new category of devices in direct confrontation with PCs. That is not their purpose. Will there be, again, border fights? Yes. Will there be some comparison made in the marketplace by the press? Of course. But I really believe that the Smartbook category will be a success if ultimately people that own one still have a PC somewhere if they need it, probably still have a smartphone somewhere, and this device will create a new use case, differentiated, and more in tune with today's needs of the consumer when it comes to accessing the cloud. I think there's some very interesting opportunities for cosmetic differentiation. I mean, we didn't show it to you there, but maybe it'll be shown later today. But there's an opportunity to have some fashion brands embrace this new concept because of the form factor, something that they've been fairly reluctant to do with PCs. And I think there will be a category of users that will look at Smartbook because they're smart and they look smart. So we're working on that as well as other ideas. I think the user interface is going to be a key element of differentiation. And we're not waiting for the Microsoft operating system. If it comes one day in a different flavor than what it is today, so be it. But the attributes of what it does for the consumer will be more important than the brand of the operating system or any other component. So with that, this were rapidly, some of my thoughts about this market. As I said, it's storming. There's a lot of things happening. I don't think anyone has the monopoly of being right or wrong on this. We're very passionate at Freescale about this opportunity. It turned out that the i.MX family, and particularly the i.MX 51 family, is a great engine for this first generation of Smartbooks. Many partners are working on these devices. We're seeing prototypes that are very exciting. They're going to turn out in a lot of different flavors: IP phone implementations, smart tablets, and of course Smartbooks. We have a whole roadmap that we're putting together to support year after year an evolution that I think is promising to be quite exciting. I said at the beginning that today 3G connectivity is probably too expensive and too slow, but perhaps by the time we get to LTE, we'll have actually the throughput that's needed for a true correct browsing experience, but also maybe some business models where the cost of connectivity will be appropriate. So we haven't given up, of course, on that aspect of the connectivity scenario. Today we have some special guests that have come to share their views and what they've learned in the Smartbook marketplace with us. And I'm going to ask my colleague Steve Sperley, who's been one of the pioneers at Freescale leading the effort in that particular market segment, to come and join me. He's going to be the host for the day, introduce our next guest speakers, and also probably share some of his thoughts about this marketplace. So in closing, I want to thank you for being part of this session. I hope that we have time for question and answers maybe towards the end. And with that, I'll turn it over to Steve. Thanks, Steve.